In the previous lecture, we talked about the 4 ingredients that you need to build a successful compost pile. So before we get started and build our pile, I kind of want to step through each one of these ingredients and kind of build it as we go. So if you recall, the first ingredient that we talked about was shelter. And shelter really is the largest part of your bin. It's going to be the browns. It's going to be the mulch, the oak leaves, the straw that you mix in, all those woody type materials. And this is going to be the largest part of your bin. It's going to make up the largest volume. And we call it shelter because it's really what you hide or build around the next ingredients that we put in. So here at the Compost Learning Center, I like to use mulch as my brown. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, the county here chips up the mulch, so I get it in abundance and I have it readily available. Secondly, I find that it breaks down really well. And third, if I don't feel like screening out my compost, I really can still have a kind of a mulch or nitrogen-rich mulch material, and I can spread that out on my beds, and it kind of is an easier way to kind of get through a lot of the material. So let's start here. First, I mentioned I have the browns, and here we have the mulch material. You know, another thing that we have, I am surrounded by oak leaves. Oh, I get a lot of questions about oak leaves. Do they break down really well? Are they good for their bin? They are great for your bin. One of the things we find, if you put lots and lots of those in, it can create a layer where the water can't get through. So you really want to kind of crush or break those up sometimes. Sometimes we run them over with a mower or chip them up to add in there. So the first thing we want to do is create a nice base layer. And I've already got this bin kind of started, so there's some mulch already in there and compost going, but we're going to add that in as our first material. So that's the shelter or the browns, high in carbon. Our second ingredient is going to be our food waste. And we'll talk later in this class about the types of foods that go in, but for today, I really just have a few little items in here. I have a papaya that I just cut up the other day. I have kind of a unique dragon fruit that's in there as well. And then I have a couple other things. One is a corn on the cob. One thing about corn on the cob, this won't hurt your bin, but it will take a long time to break down. So I might just kind of set that off to the side for now as we go in. Any kinds of fruits and vegetables look really, really great to add in. So the food waste is known as the greens. So we refer to composting as browns and greens. The greens are higher in nitrogen. So they're really what breaks down and creates that material that we're looking for. So we can do this 2 ways. We can add this directly into our bin, or another step that I like to do if I have a lot of frozen and lots of different types of things that are kind of harder in content, is I like to put it in a bin, add a little bit of browns in there, a touch of my water, right? And then I break it up. I use this and I just break it up into little smaller pieces. Anytime you can create more surface area and put things into smaller pieces, they're gonna break down way, way quicker. You know, you can see by breaking this down, it can happen within weeks. It can be completely gone. You can do this in a bucket like this, or you could just dump it simply into your bin like this here and break it up in here. Either way works, but I would suggest kind of breaking it up and it helps to mix it in a little bit like that. So now we have our browns and our greens in our bin. One thing to remember, and I love this visual, is I call it shelter for a reason for the browns. Think of the compost bin like your home. So you have a large house and a small refrigerator. So you want a lot more of those browns, a lot more of that shelter than you do the food, than you do that refrigerator. You will never get in trouble composting if you have too many browns. You'll just have more material to screen off at the end of the process. Where I see a lot of people get in trouble is when they flip those, when they have way too much of the green, the food material, and not enough browns. I also see this a lot with folks that are using those tumblers that we talked about earlier with the bins. They'll come out, just dump their food waste right in, and it turns into a soupy mess in there. They forget to add that brown. You want to keep that 30-to-1 ratio, carbon to nitrogen, or more, and this doesn't mean 30 pieces of mulch to every one strawberry. What it really is how it breaks down and the ratios of how much is in the material. What you really want to do is start with a 3-to-1 volume ratio. 3 of the browns to every 1 of the food. Kind of hide it in there, and then you can scale back a little bit as you get more and more experience with the composting. So think of it more as a volume type thing. The next ingredient that we need, we already used a little bit of it, is going to be water. We want to keep our composting bin nice and damp, almost like a damp sponge. So if you were to lift it up and wring it, it has a nice kind of wet feel to it. Be sure you get it all the way around. I even like to go on the outside of the bin. Helps to keep ants and different types of pests kind of away and keep those down. You want to mix that in really well. We also are going to add a little bit more browns to hide our food in there, right? So we've got our brown layer in there, we've got our nitrogen food layer, we've got some more browns on top in a great volume, and then we're going to just get it nice and wet, nice and damp in there. All right, so that's 3 ingredients that we need in there. The 4th ingredient we're going to need is air. Composting is an aerobic process, meaning with air. So when we think of aerobic, I want you to think of exercise. So when we go out and exercise, our body temperature heats up, we take in a lot of oxygen, a lot of air, and that's an aerobic process. Composting is the same way. When we balance our browns, our greens, and our water, and we mix in a component of air, we attract the microbes, the bacteria that makes this happen. So what we need to do is use one of these tools here. You can use a little pitchfork here or get a smaller type spade or something like that. And you just want to kind of stick it in there and fluff it up a little bit. You know, every so often, just kind of fluff it up a little bit. Make sure there's some air pockets in there. And I would suggest just every time you add some more food, come out and just kind of turn your compost a little bit, even just lifting it up a little bit, creating some of those air pockets in there. I like to also, if you can get your hands on some straw material and mix a little bit of that in there, that creates some natural type pockets as well. So once we have those 4 components balanced together, you let it sit, you let it break down, and we're going to come back and show you how to screen here in a little bit.